What's going on, everybody? It's Ricky with Video Homicide. Welcome to day 20 of the 31 Days of Horror. And today we're going to be talking about 1988's The Blob, directed by Chuck Russell and written by Frank Darabont, who went on to do movies like The Green Mile, Shawshank Redemption, Dream Warriors, he did previous to this. But nonetheless, The Blob is one of those movies from the 80s that was one of the, what you might call holy trinity of the remakes of films from the 50s. So in 1980s, you had The Thing, The Fly, The Blob, all remakes of films from the 50s, and all what I consider vast improvements on films from the 50s, because I've mentioned in the past, I'm not the biggest fan of the 1950s when it comes to cinema. There's some stuff in there peppered throughout for sure. Movies like Godzilla, movies like Moby Dick, and so on and so forth. But for the most part, there's a lot of that, sort of really schlocky, giant monster movies. And, I like some of them. Some of the stuff is okay, but for the most part, I can't really get into that type of stuff. Very hokey type shit. But um, movies like The Fly, the original Blob, the original Thing, I think those are probably three of the best monster films of the 50s. And I think, because they were remade in the 80s, where there was, a world of practical effects that were vastly improved upon the movies of the 50s. We got some killer stuff. And I think The Blob was a perfect movie to remake, for the time. So to give a little bit of backstory on my history with this film, when I was a kid, and I've talked about this before on the channel, somewhere on the channel, one of my most influential nights of watching movies, I was with my dad, and we watched Creature from the Black Lagoon and The Blob, and we taped both of them, and I still have those taped copies up there behind me. And I specifically remember, when I think of those movies, I think of Chicken Soup, because my dad makes fucking amazing chicken soup. I haven't had it in years because I stopped eating meat, but it's to die for. So when I think of those movies, I smell chicken soup cooked by the old man. It's super crazy, because I remember it was the first time that I watched either one of those films, and it was kind of a big deal, because I remember, I've constantly referenced, like, I watched a lot of crazy movies that I probably shouldn't have at a young age, but I'd seen what I considered the best of the Universal monster films, like the ones that my dad owned, i.e., Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolfman, The Mummy, and Bride of Frankenstein. So I thought that was, like, as good as it got. But I always seen the trailer for Creature from the Black Lagoon on those tapes, and seen it in books and all kinds of stuff. I know, it's sort of like the old classic standard where, us horror people, when we were kids, we resorted to magazines, which there wasn't a lot of magazines when I was a kid. There was, but I wasn't buying them because I was pretty young, you know what I mean? So Fangoria was out, Rue Morgue, I don't know if that was around yet, but Fangoria was definitely around when I was a kid. And I remember seeing it in Chapters, or maybe International News, a couple of these, like, little bookstore type places, and I never got them, but I always looked at them and always thought, like, wow, like, that's crazy. And then um, when I first got my first copies of those magazines, I was, like, blown away. And of course, they were all about movies from back in the day, and I love them. And I have a decent amount of Fangoria's Famous Monsters, Horror Hounds, that kind of stuff. Maybe we'll get into that. Or I think I might have recently done a video on those, but either way, um, there was always Creature from the Black Lagoon somewhere in the mix. And when you listen to people's videos now, and they talk about some of their favorite movies, and Creature always shows up. And they're, that was my favorite Universal horror. Like, I think it's pretty good, but I never considered it even close to my favorite. I think my favorite two will go without saying in the next couple of videos. But The Blob, okay, I love the original Blob, for the record. I think it's really good, but this, I think, is way better. We got 1988's, like I said, Chuck Russell. Um, this movie is way better than the original, in my opinion. I think that it's you know, partly in due. I love Kevin Dillon. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't see this until way later. Like, I'd probably seen Platoon by the time that I seen this, and I knew Kevin Dillon as the guy from Platoon. So when he bashes that guy's head in, and like, it's so crazy. Like, when you think about it now, like, the amount of violence and stuff, but when you look at the movies of nowadays, like, they're so shitty. It's like, you can either expose a kid to, like, an amazingly violent film that's going to be well acted, or you can expose a kid to a violently acted shitty film. You know what I mean? Like, movies nowadays, like, holy fuck, man, it's very, very different compared to the 1980s. But I'm pretty sure everybody knows the story of the Blob. An asteroid crashes on Earth, and this old man gets it on his hand, and he's taken to the hospital by some teenagers. And Kevin Dillon is cool in this movie because he plays like this badass, sort of like mechanic apprentice that's like also kind of just he's trying to like mind his own, but he's getting mixed up with the law and all that kind of stuff. And I believe it's also important to mention that I think Frank Darabont also had something to do with what's the show called, Walking Dead. And I think there's a few Walking Dead faces throughout this movie, but it's a great like remake in the sense that like it updates the what the kids would be doing, what the kids would be talking about and acting like, because I love how there's this whole little interaction with these two jocks, and they're going to take out this girl that ends up being with Kevin Dillon by the end of the film. But they have this banter where they go into this pharmacy, and the one guy, he's like, I'm buying condoms. They're not for me. They're for my friend. Blah blah blah. He's got a date, and of course, when the guy goes to pick up his date, he's picking up the daughter of the pharmacist. So the pharmacist knows that he has condoms, and he gives him this look. But I always love that scene in this movie. In terms of practical effects, I think it looks spot on. Like from the time that it gets on the old hobo's hand all the way up until the end of the film when it's inside of like, what is it? It's kind of like a diner. Like I've always wanted to be in a diner like that. You know what I mean? And same with like the old movie theater. Like I love in this movie how there's these kids, the younger brother and friend of the girl, like the lead girl in this movie, they go see this flick, and it doesn't hold back. Like there's some child deaths in this film, which I'm always a fan of because I think that it's fitting. It's fitting in a movie like this. The old one kind of played it safe, whereas this one took it to the next level. And like I said, the effects are just immaculate. Very well done. Like not like one of my favorite scenes involves like I don't know what you would call it, but it's like a a sink that has like like a blender in it to cut up the garbage. There's a trash compactor or something like that, but like a guy like sticks his hand in there, he's trying to plunge something out, and it ends up being the Blob. And of course, we get sort of like that scene again from the original film where the Blob is like pushed against the grates and it's coming in, and great scene in a sewer. Like there's just there's so many good parts of this movie, and I love that Kevin Dillon is like the hero in this movie, and he's also like the badass, like not the misunderstood badass, but just like the guy that's like cool. You know what I mean? And I can't see shit. Dark as fucking here, but there's a few other actors in here that I recognize, but I just can't put my finger on them right now. I would highly recommend watching this movie with the original. Like it kind of sets it up for you. Like there is a remake to the original Blob, but if you double feature the original Blob with the Blob remake, you're in for a good time. And you could do that with all of those three films, like the Blob, the Fly, the Thing. Um, I think of the three, I would probably pick the Thing, and then maybe the Fly, and then maybe the Blob. But it changes up from time to time because I'm a big Cronenberg fan, great Canadian filmmaker. And he did the Fly rather, and it just turned out so good. Such a body horror film. I've been watching a lot of Cronenberg lately, so definitely would probably go with the Fly right now. See, it changes, like I started off saying the Thing, now I'm saying the Fly. I don't know, maybe the Blob, but I don't know. This movie is just meant for uh you know, fans of horror movies. And, it doesn't have to just be the 50s, it could be the 60s or whatever. It's a fan of people that like the genre of horror. And I'll pretty much leave it at that. So, with that being said, I appreciate everybody for watching. Leave a 666 in the comments if you watch it all the way through. Go ahead and watch The Blob tonight if you can. And with that being said, adios.